Hey everybody, it's Miss Burton. Today we're going to take the Tangle patterns that we learned last time and we're going to put them into a Tangle doodle. So the last time we did two patterns that were organic in nature, meaning that they look like they come from nature. And we did one that was based on a checkerboard, and then we added some additional details to it. So I've set up a string, which again is just a series of lines to help us to break up our space. If you see the light changing, I have my assistant Abby, my calico kitty cat, sitting next to me purring. So if you hear that, that's my emotional support cat who is happy that her mom is home. There she is. It's Abby. Okay, you can move on. We love you. Sweet kitty. She just wanted to share herself, so she's right here. And I have the materials that I'm working with, again, are a 3x5 artist tile. Forgot what that was called for a second. And this is just a piece of cardstock. You can use any white paper or colored paper that you have on hand or that you'd like to use. Some people do these on black paper with like gel pens of different colors or white. So totally up to you how you want to do it. All right, Abby is right next to the paper here. So there's our assistant. Thank you, Abby. So as I'm looking at my different patterns and I'm looking at the spaces on my string that I've set up, again, this is just a random thing where I connected 4 dots in the 4 corners of my square and with just some loose lines to break up the space. Now I decided on 3 spaces since I have 3 patterns that I wanted to use today. So as I'm thinking about how to choose which pattern goes in which section, I might think about where would a grid-based pattern fit the easiest on my tile. And I'm thinking it might go easily here, but I could put it anywhere else. Okay, Abby, thank you. So I think I'm going to put it here, but remember that this graphite pencil is just going to be for shading after I've drawn my string. So I've drawn my string. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check my posture. I've got my fountain going outside, so I'm listening to what sounds I have. I'm checking in with my breathing. Am I holding my breath? I want to take at least one good slow deep breath. So I'm going to take a breath in. And I hear a truck going by outside, and that's okay. And I let out my breath, and I hear my fountain outside, like my own private waterfall. All right, I might hear some birds. I might hear some people walking by. I've got my doors open for fresh air. Checking my posture. I'm sitting up nice and tall. I'm going to scoot a little bit forward in my seat so that I'm able to put my feet flat on the floor because that really helps. Yeah, I think I'll put this pattern here. So I'm going to do myself a favor and rotate my paper into a place that makes it easy for me to work. And I'm going to work with the curve that's naturally built into my wrist. I'm going to hold onto my pen lightly and breathe in. And on the exhale, I'll go ahead and pull a line. Breathe in. And exhale a curve. And I just want it to be a nice smooth line. And I'm going to check my spacing, decide how big I want this to be. If it's pretty small, it might be hard for me to fit the pattern that I want to fit. So there won't be a ton of this pattern, and that's okay. So I'm just going to check this in the air, breathe in. And on the exhale, okay, and just checking the spacing here. I don't have a whole lot of space left, but I think I could just do one little section there that's approximately the same distance. And I started in the middle, and that's just my own quirk. That one looked a little bit straighter than the one above it. That's okay. I'm going to go for a curve on this next one. What nice sounds I have with the water and my cat purring. Really nice sounds. These are a little uneven, and it's just really not going to matter. So I'm thinking about where that next one would go, and I think it would disappear. So remember that the string that we sketched with graphite, with our graphite pencil ahead of time, it's really just a suggestion. We don't have to exactly follow it at all. I'm going to kind of come up here. And a nice gentle curve, and I want approximately the same spacing that I'd set up in the opposite direction. Breathe in. It can be tempting to hurry. For me, I'm thinking I don't want a super long tutorial. I can always fast forward later. But if you're feeling rushed while you're working, you're going to get uneven lines, and you're just going to feel anxiety, and our goal here is to breathe and relax and let that go. Okay, I've still got a little bit of a wiggle in my lines, and I can tell that I've got some anxiety going on. I mean, let's face it, people, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We're not going to get perfectly rested at any time. So I can choose to continue into this space, or I can choose to stop at this point. I think what I'll do, just checking my spacing here, that might have gone something like that. And other than that, I think I'm pretty good. So remember that to make this pattern, I'm going to be doing some smaller curves in my individual boxes here. And because these are so small, I may not want to take an entire inhalation or exhalation to do one section. But I do want to go for a continual line where I'm not picking up my pen if I can help it. And it's not too hard when I have a small space like this. And remember that imperfection is part of the beauty. So I see that it's wet, and I'm just waiting a moment for these to dry so that I don't rub my finger through and smudge my work. And if I do, it's okay. Noticing that my spine likes to collapse as I'm working. I forget to use my muscles to hold myself up. And I notice that some of my little curves are higher than others, some are lower than others, and it's okay. Imperfection is totally fine. Okay, it's to be expected and it's allowed. So notice I'm just rotating my paper as I'm going in different directions. Make life easy. I keep stopping short for some reason. I'm noticing that's a habit in this moment. And I can just try to continue to notice that as I'm working and aim for improvement. So I'm going to try to really aim for that intersection where those lines come together. Okay, I think that's it for that direction. So I've got 1, 2, 3, one more. The patterns become quick when you don't have a lot of space for them. But really notice your pace. Notice if you are hurrying. And you can kind of ask yourself why you're hurrying. Do you have to get up and make dinner right now? Is there some emergency that you need to tend to? If so, please stop what you're doing and tend to the emergency and come back when you can. But if not, allow yourself to just be here with your work. All right. So there's one more step in that pattern, and that is the section inside that sort of mimics a square, but it's curved to echo the shapes that it's inside. And I'm just trying to keep a consistent space between my new curves and the curves that were already there. And I'm noticing this raw edge here, and I noticed that as I was noticing it, there was a small twinge of anxiety that came up to me, wondering if I should do something more to that space. I'm showing you something that's off the screen. So this space here that's following this curved graphite edge that I've drawn. So I'm going to try to allow myself to not worry about it. And if I choose to later, I could do an edge pattern. To define that edge a little more if I want, or I can just leave it as is. It's not hurting anybody. I'm just doing this for myself. Okay, I'm just going to double check and see if there's anything that I missed in this pattern. Now I could choose to do my shading at this point, or I could come back and do it later. I think I feel like doing it now. I'll set my pen down. Okay. So I have two other patterns. And I have one that has repeated ovals with kind of a wavy, snaky shape underneath it. kind of reminds me of some grasses or little plants that might have a stem and maybe a flower section or a seed pod or something going on at the top. And then I have something that does look like a flower pattern. And these are pretty big. Now I could make these smaller, but that might be difficult. And I don't want to make life hard right now. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the larger of my 2 remaining spaces for my pattern that's larger in size. And I'm going to remind myself that this starts with just a simple little circle. And then I have 6 lines that are radiating out. I'm not really sure why I have 6. That's just how the pattern was drawn, though there are only 5 petals. So if it works better for you to do 5 of these little radiating arms instead of 6, then do what works for you. A pattern just means that it's got repetition, sameness, and I think I'm just going to start with those 2 middle sections for now, and I'm going to remind myself, let's start with a section where I can draw this whole petal shape, that this is going to come out and kind of fishtail at the end. Okay, and I'm going to rotate this. Check my breathing. That would go off this section, and I'll bring it back. I'll go this way. This would go off this section and come back. And then I have 2 more. And 1 more. Okay. And then how will I fit this one? And I can make that decision. I could just finish that. Like I said, the string here on the outside edge is a suggestion. So if your pattern doesn't fit perfectly within it, that's okay. Now I could decide to go behind this one and just sneak this in the back. That's kind of playful. So why not? And I can decide now if I want to use a filler pattern to fill in the background, or if I feel like there's room to squeeze in more of this pattern. And I think that because I went about the same size as I did on my practice, I'm just going to leave it. I guess I could squeeze in a center of another one, so it's okay to change your mind. Only doing 2 feels like it's not quite enough. But there's just not going to be a whole lot to this last one here. But at least I can eat up some of that background space. Okay, and now I can choose to fill in the background like I did on this one. Okay, if I want to do my shading now, I can. Give it a moment, make sure it's dry. Remind myself how I did this. So I can decide, I did some shading kind of on the underneath section of these little middle circles. And so I have to decide which way is underneath and be consistent. So if it's going to be underneath this side on all of these, then let's keep it the same. So just kind of loosely around the outside here. Going in with the graphite, kind of giving it a halo or an aura of graphite, and perfection is not necessary. Now, something that was not done last time, but I like the idea of, is just to bring the graphite into the middle just a little bit, as well as at the tips, and then I'm gonna blend that and see how that looks. Thinking of actual flower petals often have an indentation or some kind of stripes to lead a pollinator, an insect, or a bird, a bee, into the interior portion of that. It's looking just a little bit smudgy overall, so maybe a little less of the graphite, maybe just a little down the middle. Okay, also you're going to end up with it on the tip of your finger if you do this, so you could end up just smudging graphite out into a larger space. You have to decide what you're okay with. Okay, now if this one is in front of this, if this section is in front of this one, then it's going to cast a shadow as the light comes down to it. So I can spread that light out, and then put graphite here around the outside of this middle section. I did my shading okay, and like I said, if I don't like something, I'm not going to use an eraser. That's just not a tool for this project. So I have one more section. I've got some nice contrast here. I have different size of my sections here compared to here, my large open sections. I have a different feeling of curve here than I do here, a tighter curve. And this one I have some little straight lines. I have some completely black areas where here I just have black lines. So it's nice to have sections that are adjacent or that touch each other that have a nice strong contrast. I've got this one remaining pattern here, and I'm going to decide how I want to bring that in. I might have those angle in this way. I might have them go up that way. I might have them go up that way. I think I'll have them go up this way. I like that idea. And I'm going to remind you and myself that these lines here in the graphite as a string are just suggestions. So I'm actually going to check my posture and breathe. And I'm just going to start out with a little short one here. And I think I will make this one a little taller. Maybe do one this way. So I can think about having some of these segments going into different spaces. I'm gonna have this coming in from the side because who says I can't? I feel like my sections here are not very wavy. And if that's just how it is today, then that's just how it is today. So I'm going to remember that I'm just going around kind of oval shapes, and I can decide how many times I want to go around. Okay, maybe I really want to fill in a section. Here I have this one, and immediately it's bumping into this other segment here. If I want to just fill all the empty spaces with this pattern, I can. Or I can shade in the background, or I can leave the background plain. And I'm noticing a similarity in value here in the distance between my line segments and sections. So I could shade in black, and that's going to feel a lot like this one here. or I could pick in a filler pattern. And here I shaded in black and I did some shading with my sections. So I have to decide. I think I'll shade in black. I'm going to bring that black up. Okay, so I'm just doing a visual check of how I filled in my space. Do I want to go in and do a little shading on this one? I think I will. You might be noticing places where I can really see the dots that I drew on the edge of my string. And you may have a feeling of discomfort around that, or you might enjoy how that looks. For me, I'm going to leave it, since an eraser is not one of the tools of Tangle Doodles. Just going to let it be. That may be difficult for some artists who like to have a feeling of control, and that might make you feel like you're out of control. So you can ask yourself if you can just sit with that feeling, if it's okay with you to be a little bit out of control. And I'm noticing this spot here, and I think that I want to shade that little tiny, tiny section in. Okay, and I'm noticing how this feels just kind of raw there, and I'm going to ask myself, just checking in for myself to see if that's okay. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are things that you can do to tidy up a section. So I could put in a pattern in here. And I'm just kind of checking in with myself to see if I want this pattern or not. So I'm going to do just kind of a line here to tie that in. And I'm going to go inside that line and I'm going to fill it with little circles. So this is one way that you can do a simple border pattern. And that pattern is in the repetition. So right now I'm repeating the movement in a very small movement in my hand and my wrist. So the cat has stood up. Okay, and I can decide if I want to shade in the little tiny spaces in between, if that's important to me or not. Okay, and I can just leave it like that if I want. I can zoom in and add just a little bit of curved shadow on the bottom of these, what were circles when I drew them. Okay, and that can give a feeling of 3-dimension, a little shadow. Can make it look more like a little string of pearls or something that I have there. And I have this section down here on the bottom, and I think I'm just going to leave it. So I could do a border pattern anywhere that I wanted. I could do a border pattern along here, and I think that I'm just going to let it be. So I'm going to sit with my Tangle for a moment. Notice what I've done. Decide which way I'd like to have be the top. I could have these coming down. I could put my initials here or here. I've got some space. I could put them here. I think I'll initial this way, facing in this direction. So I'm going to breathe and do my Tangle initials, just like that. If I want to flip my paper over and write some notes about how I was feeling today, I notice I'm feeling some anxiety today, how it felt to do this Tangle, anything that came up for me. That is something that you could do. You could put the date on the back. Now, if you have a thin paper that you're working with and your ink is going to bleed through, then you might want to do your notes to yourself in pencil and graphite on the back. But that's the end of it. There's our Tangle. I'd love to see what you did, and I hope you have a great day.